Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service, here today to present the full moon, which will occur Tuesday, June 14th at 7:51:34 a.m. I am doing a chart, of course, located in Washington, D.C. And I thought it was pretty interesting that we're doing a full moon in the middle of our January 6th broadcasts, our prime time, showing us what really happened January 6th, is occurring during a full moon. Now remember that full moons are about disclosure, they're reflections. So things can be found out during new moons. And I thought it was really interesting that these two things are coinciding at the same time, because the trials actually begin on the 9th, but they go 9th, 13th, 15th, 23rd. So in other words, they're right over the period where we're going to be reflecting on our full moon. So I do want to focus a little bit on that, though, as I always want to focus on the full moon as a chart, because no matter where you are in the world, you too are going to be affected by this particular full moon. I just want to do a little bit to talk about the January 6th insurrection on our government. So before I begin, as always, thank you so much for watching these videos. And most particularly, thank you to the people who subscribe. If you're not a subscriber, I hope you'll consider becoming one. And in the meantime, if you would, like, share, comment. I'd love to hear from you. So I'm going to jump right in and look at this chart. So the very first part of what we do, we are going to look at this chart. So I am going to do the angles of the chart and the houses and all of that, only because there's so much going on here in the United States regarding Washington, D.C. So I do want to talk about that. But I am going to also look at the aspects of this particular full moon and what that means to everyone in the world, as well as looking at this particular full moon on the dial. So again, just looking at this full moon from the perspective of no matter where you are in this country or where you are in the world, you can see how this particular chart could affect you, at least for the next couple of weeks. So let's have a look, see what it says. So I'm back, and we're looking at the chart. I'm using solar fire because I definitely want to see the asteroids, so I have to use solar fire. But I do want to point out a couple of things. First of all, not too far from the Aries point, okay? But so I do believe the world will be watching. I don't know that they're going to be as affected, because we're about 2 degrees, a little less than 2 degrees off here, and we're almost 4 degrees off there. So our angles are not quite with the Aries point. However, we do have some interesting things, which I thought I do want to point out. I want to point out that Jupiter is the first planet off of the midheaven. So that I wonder if during this full moon, at least in the United States, we can have some healing. Now, remember that Jupiter is also affiliated with the law. So I'm wondering if that's going to be impactful for us as a population in the United States. That's one. The other thing that I thought was really interesting was we have Ceres, which is the parent children, and there's been a lot of stuff about gun control, and we really need gun control. But also, this is really interesting because we have that parent-child thing, but we also have right with it Kronos. And Kronos is authorities, and ironically, both of those are on the ascendant. So we might be hearing more about gun laws. At least pieces, ISIS here. At least pieces of gun control. That's why I need my asteroids. Also, right off of the ascendant, also a valuable fact. Slow. Yeah. We've waited more than a year since the insurrection to get to the point where some of the people are finally having to be accountable. So it's very interesting. I also like that Demeter as well as Cirrus is here, and they both represent parents, caretaking, taking care. So again, I wonder what's going on with gun laws because that seems to be a really big factor in this full moon, along with the insurrection. So there is, I think, some healing and maybe hopefully healing for an authority because one of the things that's really been happening is that the people who are Trumpian, the insurrectionists, have been very negative the president, the present president. They are putting things on him that are not his fault, that he has nothing to do with, and it's a big propaganda machine of disinformation. So I'm hoping that that represents that. The other factor here is the 28-degree Pluto and how that Pluto still figures in with everything because you can see it's off of the descendant here and it's running with politics. Well, it's running with Minerva, but Minerva and Pallas have a lot to do with politics because it's all about, you know, hearing what you want to hear or people saying what you want to hear. Now, it is retrograde. I will tell you the insurrection is very political. And I'm really hoping that the lies that the Republicans think is okay, it's not. You know, I like the new one. It's against the law for Republicans to lie to Congress or to the FBI. Well, I got news for you. It's against the law if you're a Democrat. I don't even think independence. I mean, it doesn't matter what you are politically. If you do either of those things, you're lying. So I just think it's really interesting. I do think that this will solve some problems, though it is retrograde and it may not be obvious. There's a lot of people who are very concerned that people will not even watch this. And I don't think that's true. But I also believe that this is going to put pressure on them to come up with some kind of gun law. Okay. So that's real interesting. This, of course, is a full moon, so the sun and the moon are opposing one another. And very interesting that they fall in the 6th and the 12th house. And the sun, in particular, is in the 12th house. 12th house is like secrets. So I'm wondering if some new information doesn't come to us through the trials, or possibly even through this push for gun control as maybe another factor. So as we go around the houses, and I didn't see a lot, I do want to point out partnerships are a big deal on the IC, and when it comes to both gun control and the coup attempt, let's call it what it is, there are partnerships, and we're still learning about all the different partnerships. Here on the cusp of the 3rd house, we have enabling. And one of the things about the 3rd house is, remember, it's communications, it's messaging, and one of the things about the messaging has been, and it's attacks. See this? Now, attacks is not involved in anything, but it is kind of close. And it does talk about how this communication or these attacks were enabling the big lie, but they're enabling. I'll get to that. So then we go on and just again, just trying to pull up things that show up at these house cusps. Okay. So as I come down here, look at this speaking up or speaking out. You know, one of the things, and this is very true even for myself, and I am a very verbal, highly opinionated, have created a lot of, I don't want to say enemies, but yeah, maybe animosity. I can't even say the word, because of my strong opinions on this stuff, because I do speak out. What's really interesting is Hidalgo, which is representative of speaking out or not speaking out, is showing up here on the cusp of the 5th house, where I'll give you an example. A Republican running in its primary had to drop out of the race because he wants gun control. And if you speak out against gun or for gun control, if you speak out for gun control, if you really want it, the Republicans will not literally let you run. I mean, it's really awful what they're doing. Okay, so there's one example. But I think we're going to be finding that even with the insurrection, that there were people that knew things that were afraid to speak out. And one of the things about Americans, and I'm an American, born, bred, and all of that, but I got to tell you, there's a terrorist streak in us that probably is like 4 miles wide, okay, where people in this country are like terrorists if they don't get their own way. And I think we can see that as a wonderful example of the insurrectionists, because those people were terrorists. They acted like terrorists. People died. There was beatings. The police officers took beatings. This was a true act of terrorism. Well, the problem with terrorism is that people don't speak out. They're afraid. The death threats will follow. And by the way, there are things like death threats associated with this. Apollon tells you that there are many who are afraid to speak out, or many who have spoke out, but they've done it in a relative quiet manner. As a matter of fact, I believe the psychics who've been talking about how Mark Meadows and the guy who begins with the S name aren't going to be prosecuted. No, I probably not, because I think they spoke. They Hidalgo'd. Okay, they spoke up. They spoke out. So that's why people who are not speaking up will be arrested. So that's a factor. Is that speaking up, speaking out? That's huge for the United States. So I had to bring that up. So then, as I move along through our process, and you know I love to do the process, Panacea, as I mentioned, even though it's retrograde, is falling smack on the descendant, along with a very close, it's out by about 6 minutes actually, is Orpheus for sadness, for death. And I think that, the insurrection is going to point out things, but I think that it's going to only reinforce the need to make solutions regarding gun violence, because the insurrectionists also carried firearms into the White House. And by the way, they're not even allowed to have firearms in the Capitol. Okay, I keep saying firehouse. White House. It's the Capitol. And you're not allowed to have guns there, which I think is kind of ironic. They want to put them in schools, but you can't have them in the government. Again, I do not believe the Republicans are going to win anything. No House, no Senate, or anything. So I'm going to stand by that, because I think even more things are coming out through this trial. So as I move along, I get to the 8th house, where the cusp of the 8th house shows Vesta. Now, Vesta can be associations, where you belong to a group and you're all, connected, and you're like a sisterhood or a brotherhood or whatever. But Vesta is also distance. Vesta is also focusing on work and goals, and a focus on goals. And I'm wondering if one of the things that we are going to learn in this insurrection trial is the fact that this was a concerted effort, that was a goal. In other words, they were working on this before the election. I think that's one of the things we're going to be finding out. Trump knew he was going to lose. They all knew he was going to lose. He's useless. He's terrible. He was a horrible president, and he put the whole country in a bad place. And only a minority wants them, but they're a gunslinging, big mouth, really just a deadly group of terrorists. And I believe that it was very well planned, and I think we're going to find that out. So Jupiter's a little bit further away, though it is the first one crossing over. I'm not going to talk about it too much. I did already mention it. There is nothing on this cusp. However, as we get from the 11th to the 12th house, that particular cusp is crowded. Okay, it's crowded. you see here things like, here we go again, how there are unlikely partnerships. Remember, partnerships is a big deal. And the Hephaestus tells you that there are partnerships that don't seem like they're well suited, like they're odd couples. There's some odd couple situations here. And it's a sense of here we go again. Okay, and that is, that's gun control. That's even the insurrectionists. I mean, we've heard so much stuff. And Eros is about, stimulating people. It's about what excites people. And it feels to me like there could be some, again, we have so many shootings that here we go again could be the shootings. But the unlikely partnerships could be people coming together because of it. But one of the things that a psychic said, which I thought was really cool, and we are in a full moon, so we're getting a reflective period, was that we now have two groups of angry women voting in the next election. And I always like to remind people that women caused the French Revolution and they didn't even have a vote. So what's going to happen when two voting blocks get to vote? So that'll be very interesting to see. Remember that Eros is about excitement. It's not inflammation in the same way that, anger, gunfire, and all of that Zeus is. And Zeus is about only 6 minutes heading toward the Aries point again. So it's kind of wavering toward the end of it. But I have to tell you that Eros is about people becoming excited. Not so much inflamed, not so much with violence, but inflamed in terms of excited. And so I do think that's going to play a factor in all this. But that's all related to the United States. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to move where everybody is going to see what this full moon can bring for them. Okay? And the chart, let me go back, here we go. The chart, the list for that full moon event has some interesting things. Like there's a sextile to Saturn. So the people, women in particular, opportunity with the structure. Okay, the structures being Saturn. Okay, so the sun then trines Saturn. So this bodes well for our structures all over the world, maybe reinforcing them. We're still having difficulty with the disease. Okay? Both are squaring Neptune. Neptune does represent that coronavirus is still in the news. Though not many people are dying from it anymore, a lot of that has to do with vaccinations. People are getting sick. After 2 years, this disease, now it's hit my personal circle, but it's really hit my personal circle most recently. Fortunately, I am 4 shots in. So I was actually exposed and never had an issue. So the vaccinations do work. It's also referring to authority figures and its parallel authority, which is actually really good. Okay? It's actually good. There is, however, a Sun square Aries. So I would imagine that if you're anywhere else in the world, if you're looking at what's going on in DC, you're probably like, what is going on? Trust me. I could predict this years ago that we were going to be in this mess, but we're here. And it is about terrorist acts. So you go to some countries and you have to worry about 2 fractions fighting against each other. But in this country, you just have to worry about the fact that there's just too many guns. And assault rifles to boot. Okay, so in the chart, and I didn't go through this, but in the chart of the United States, we are ruled by moon. And the moon happens to be in the 6th house. So one of the things that, we might be concerned with is that idea of our everyday lives. And there we go with gun laws again. Because as much as people are concerned about the insurrection, we already know what we need to do: vote Democrat. And I think a lot of people understand that. You can't vote Republican right now. That is such a tainted party. And what's so sad is that what makes a democracy is two healthy parties. It just turns out that right now we don't have that. We don't have two healthy parties. We do have one healthy party that fights and discusses and does dialogue within, because we have moderates and conservatives within one party. Because that's how all of the United States, it's both parties really that are like that. They have a more moderate strain and then a more conservative strain. The problem is the radical right has taken over the crutch of and they're a minority, but they've taken over the crutch of the Republican Party, which is why some people can't even run. Because I read another article about another man, and I can't think of who he was, but he's having a hard time because he doesn't think that Roe versus Wade should be reversed. But see, according to the Republicans, if you're not in lockstep, apparently they won't give you money, they won't, they won't back you. So, yeah, that would look really strange to people who are not in this country. So I did want to point that out. I do feel that that this particular month of reflection, or I should say a couple of weeks of reflection, I do believe that it's going to be more reinforcement. I think that we're going to look at our structures and see where we do need to fix them. And we have a lot of things that need to be fixed. I mean, some of our laws are like hundreds of years old, not applicable. Our Second Amendment really needs to be rewritten. The irony is, back in the day, you could have your handgun or your flintlock or your long gun, as they were called, but you were not allowed to have a cannon. And I think it's really amazing that somehow we're allowed assault rifles, which in my opinion are much worse than cannons. So again, we have to really look at that Second Amendment, rewrite it. It's not applicable to today's world. Pretty soon, the Second Amendment people are going to say it's okay for us to have a nuclear bomb. I mean, it's really coming to that. Really, it's like, where's the line here? So I guess the rest of the world is going to be looking at that with us. So what I want to do now, to kind of round this out, is to go back into the dial, where again it affects everybody. And one of the things I want to talk to you all about, depending on no matter where you live, is that right now in the Aries point we do have Atlantis. And that means that we might be, as a world, looking at more of what's going on in the seas. And I think of the Black Sea, and I think of Russia, and I think of what's going on with Russia and that sea, because Atlantis is talking about the seas, the oceans, the water, if you will. But it's also a sense of gloom and doom. And it will make people become a little bit more pessimistic. Some of this pessimism is going to happen through what they learn through their own news cycles, but it's also about risks that are taken. So we're learning about risk, but also about how the change of direction has to result. Any kind of change in direction in your life right now could bring a sense of, just a little bit. So be aware of that. That's in the charts. It is what it is. I also feel that one of the things that shows up here, and I wonder how much this will even show up in the United States. Like I said, there wasn't a lot of Aries point in there, but the Sun to Lilith, the Black Moon Lilith, okay, not the asteroid Lilith, is kind of an interesting concept because it talks about how we're stuck by karma, by what we've done in the past. Remember, I just got done saying hundreds of years old. Come on, people, we got to catch up here. And the Black Moon, the Lilith, which I like to call her rather Lilith than Black Moon, what black and white gives such a connotation, but it shows where we're stuck. And we're stuck. And so that's going to be everywhere and anywhere in the world. So we all might want to check that one out, okay? Just as, something to be, And then the other point, of course, in the Aries point, and then I'll get to the asteroids in a second, the other asteroids. We're looking around 2230, and you see there's a Venus Neptune in here, and a lot of times that can be disappointment. Now, it can be disappointment in love, can be disappointment in financial matters, but it also could be deception in those factors. So we want to look at that. But what I like about this is the Ceres is with the Volcanus. In this country, now this is coming up everywhere in the world, but in this country, there's a lot of pressure coming from parents of children because of the gun violence. So I'm going to grab a list here, and we're going to finish out this by going through the asteroids that show up not only in the Aries point axis, but in that sun-moon axis, which also affects us all. Okay, I'm back. You know, as soon as I picked up this paper, I realized something. The sun, not the sun, the midheaven of the United States, which is this. And I'll just show you this really quick. This really blew my mind. Look at that, 356. Okay. At 438, meaning it's in aspect, it's like right on that midheaven, is the asteroid Merlin. So I think we're going to be in the United States hearing about a little bit of magic, or how do I like to put this? A little bit of how somebody actualized something. I already know who that person is. I'm thinking it's the ex-president, but we'll see. I just had to show that. Okay, so coming back, getting with the program. Okay, so as I go through this, I do want to point out that there isn't as much actor shows up in the Aries point. Okay, it's about here. And actor means that people are pretending. So that would be one of the first asteroids that does affect just the Aries point. So we're looking for that child actors. Okay, because child shows up. But it could also be how children act. Okay, children are the actors. Hara is telling us, also in this axis right here, that we need to listen to our gut, particularly when it comes to money, deceptions, love. You really, really need to pay attention to the gut, okay? It also refers to one of the ways in which people are going to act is how charming they're going to be. So look for people who are very charming. It's also referring to overreactions are going to be huge. Yeah, I think we're going to see that in the United States just by the characters on TV, because they've already said what they're going to do is blast the TV with all this negative stuff because of the insurrection stuff. So it's again, childish behavior is all we ever expect from these people. They are so childish. But it also refers to chaos that will be created through this. Okay, and this can happen in any country because remember, these actors, these people who are overreacting, and that includes Russia, is going to create a lot of chaos. And it is going to make some things worse. The chaos is just going to make things worse. And that might be that here we go again that I saw at the cusp of the 12th, things that are coming out from secret, people that are behaving badly. Watch what's going on in your social medias. Social media shows up here. It's also new beginnings, and particularly new beginnings can tend to be, very worrisome for all of us, and how it might even zap our sleep. So be careful, because your worrywart qualities could keep you from getting a good night's sleep. Bano is discussing of marriages, partnerships. It is not reacting normally, so we have a retrograde on it. Letitius, as I pointed out before, risks, Icarus, Letitius. Risks could cause us to change direction. I'm hoping so with some of these people. I already pointed out Vesta for distance, for being at a distance or being distant. Now, the next thing I want to look at is I'm going to go to the sun moon point at 23, almost 24. There we are. There it is. Okay, about 23 and a half, actually. There we go. I'm going to go about, there we go. I'm going to go about 23 and a half just to make my math easier. Okay, so what we're looking at, I'm just going through this because it's always good to do this. Look at Nemesis right off of that. There's a lot of blame going to be put on different things. And I will tell you that that's going to be a factor. Okay. Now it also equals about 830 of fixed. Okay, so you can see the angle. We have nothing there at this point. You know, I'll get to that in a minute when I get to my list. Okay, but if you're looking at 2330, then you have to take 2230 off, which brings us to 1, which means watch your news cycles, people. Watch your news cycles because Mercury is definitely in there. Look at that Mercury. Look at this Hopi for attacks, for prejudices, you know, we're going to get a lot of news on that, okay? And that is worldwide because I am now in the sun moon axis, which is the same everywhere you live. Okay, so the sun, the moon, it just hits at different times, which is why the outer rims of the chart looks differently. Here you can see that it equals Chiron, it equals Isis, it equals a health factor. And it makes me wonder again about this, our health, our COVID issues, our health factors, especially when you have Hades Zeus. You know, the deterioration could be very upsetting, especially if you're in a country like China where they've been really shutting down. Can be very, very difficult. So that brings us to 16 degrees around. So these things are approximate, and that's I'm keeping. So that's our axis. So as we go around our little circle here, we know that Chiron, as I've already mentioned, alternative factors are involved in this, okay? Mars is slightly, because it's just inside of. So that means that there's a lot of actions toward alternative directions. Now, in this country, because the Republicans won't take away assault rifles, they're going to continue to throw in mental health. That's fine. We could use help there too. When the Democrats get completely in, I think we're going to see a complete ban on them. But until then, we'll have alternative situations. But in each country, it will be different. In each state, there could be different, because I've also been hearing of alternatives when it comes to abortions. So there are, you know, actions, alternative actions that will take place. Now remember, Ophelia's in the Aries point, so there are people that will be overreacting as well. Okay, that brings me to, okay, here we go. Websites again, not real strong, but again, that social media element is still in there. It's amazing, actually. Also, you know, I feel like something's being cut. I'm not sure what. Something's being cut. So, and that might be causing that sense of gloom and doom in the Aries point. So that's another possibility on this. Then I move on and I'm heading, yes, we have Mercury, we have Achilles, a weakness. Okay, it's our Achilles heel. Yeah, in the case of this country, it's the guns, but there's a real weakness. So look at that. This is everybody, though. So I can say it because I know what this country is going through. We're going to take the plunge, though. And I think we're going to take the plunge because of news that we're hearing. And then it goes and it moves down. And I see that people are really bonding together. And I think that eventually that bonding together is what's really going to strengthen us all. I also talked about this already. Ceres, the parents, and Isis, little bits, little, you know, which also could be parents and then children, but it's not children, it's Isis, so it's pieces, pieces, pieces. You know, it's interesting because, you know, we might be eating food with our fingers too. Okay. Um, what we're really looking at here, though, is that idea of doing things in pieces. So laws will be done in pieces. Corrections will be made little by little. So that's the bigger factor here. And as I move to one face masks are making a new appearance, and I think it might be the monkeypox, and I think that might be our health issue. And it's not as severe, but it's definitely something with people traveling all over the world all the time. We have to be mindful of these things. So that could be what that's related to. I'm just throwing things out as I know, but there could be other things that will crop up that I was unaware of or that I totally didn't think of while I was sitting here that could also play a role. It's also, as I move on and I go to fixed, I am oh no, mutable. No, these are mutable. Okay, and I see we do have, I did bring this up, Hopi for attacks. I think a lot of people are going to have trouble sleeping, and we're going to be looking at those people who have lots of money, because the people who've had lots of money did terrible things in the world. And unfortunately, a lot of them were American. So I think that some of that's going to come up probably through the insurrection trial, but it is going to affect the world, and shamefully so, I have to say. I also have here truth. Truth. Very, 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 very important. The truth. Okay. And we're just getting to the truth. So it's like the beginnings. It could be in there better, but it's still touching. So we got something. Then I move to, as I said, melpomene. It's getting worse. Fisher is lies. And one of the things that we're going to be really dealing with through this whole thing, especially in the United States, but I think throughout the world, is the concept of lies and how those lies have affected all of us. That's really important. And how they've made things worse. And that's going to be true all over the world because people like Steve Bannon and his cronies, Flynn, they were doing this stuff in other countries. With shame on them. I mean, it's embarrassing and it's humiliating to people like me, anyway. I think we're going to be surprised by what we learn because the truth in this case will in some way set us free. So it really will be, and it is about the people, and then we get Varda, but Varda's farther out. But a lot of truth in here, Rosetta, truth. So that I do believe getting to the bottom of the truth for whatever it is that ails us can be a very helpful factor. As I move on, health factors, health issues, I think it's, again, the monkeypox, the coronavirus, they're still bugging us, all of this stuff. And, one of the things this is so funny. I don't know where everybody else lives in the world, but one of the things it's asking us to do is save. And it's interesting because there's somebody from the government actually got on TV. I actually watched this, was part of a news expose about if we stop spending so much that we could actually prevent inflation. Okay. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but it's so interesting because personally, in the house I live in, we've been doing that. We started doing that long even before the pandemic, but during the pandemic, we were able to make it so even more. But isn't that interesting? Like we grow our own food, I sell my own clothes, I make my own jewelry, and my significant other works with wood. So he makes his own wood, he mills it, he creates benches. And so we have learned in the last several years to be very self-sufficient. And it's been really wonderful. It's actually been a great experience. So I would say to you, do it. That's what I would say. Okay, so as I go into my last arena here, I am going to say that news is going to be very important and blame game is going to be huge. That we will all, on some level, be playing the blame game coming up through this full moon. So a couple weeks of just listening to people play the mind game, the blame game. So let me come on back. So here I am. And once again, I hope this was helpful. I really like to lay on the asteroids when I do this kind of work. I go through them rather quickly because there are so many. So if you're new to them, maybe you could pick out one or two. I think I always mentioned them when I said what it was. I know I talked extensively about Atlantis this time. I talked a lot about Sirius and Demeter. And I'm doing this intentionally because I don't want us to just look at planetary configurations. They tell us a lot, yes, and there are some wonderful astrologers out here that don't work with asteroids and they're still fairly accurate, but I just cannot believe the added detail that we get from the asteroids, so I have to throw them in my work. So with that said, I hope this was informative. I do also want to thank you for watching this, and I hope that you will share, like, and comment. But until we meet again, as always, I wish you only happy readings.